I'm not embarrassed or, you know, I'm immune to ridicule as far as this stuff. I couldn't care less what anybody thinks.
What would you like it to say below your name? What's your title?
Well, my title is U.S. Marine. I spent 6 years in the Marine Corps, so
Okay.
I guess that would be my title.
Well, thank you for your service. I appreciate that. I didn't know that.
You're welcome. No, just spell my name right, that's all. You know, I was always interested in like ghost stories, monster movies, paranormal kind of stuff, and you know, in the late 60s, early 70s, I became aware of Bigfoot, you know, and of course, you know, I watched The Legend of Boggy Creek when it came out many times, and you know, so I'd always had an interest in it, but in 2007, I had some health problems. I needed to have a quadruple heart bypass, quadruple bypass for my arteries around my heart. It was better if I recovered and didn't go back to work. One thing led to another, and I wound up tagging along with the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society on some of their research outings. This took place on Tuesday, September 9th, 1986, in Forbes State Forest, east of Uniontown, Pennsylvania, on the Chestnut Ridge. Me and two friends, I'll use their first names, Steve and Joe, and three of us were personal friends before this. We wound up working at the same place. Well, we got off on this Tuesday afternoon, after work, 5 o'clock, and we went and we got some steaks and some vegetables and stuff like that. We decided we were going to go up to Forbes State Forest and drive partially down in this road. It's a 6-mile long road that leads from the top of the ridge all the way down through Forbes State Forest and ends up in Hopwood just outside of Uniontown. But we only drove down about maybe a little more than a quarter mile, I would say about 3/10 of a mile. And it's an old, it's really like a Jeep trail. I mean, you have to have some high ground clearance to get down through there in the best weather. And when it's bad, you got to have 4-wheel drive or all-wheel drive and high ground clearance. Well, I was driving a car at the time, so we drove down in as far as the road would permit. We pulled over, and I backed the car in, and we got out. We got there about 6 o'clock. We got out. We started gathering up tinder to start a fire. We didn't bring any charcoal. We were just going to start a fire, and we kept on feeding this fire, this tinder and kindling, because we wanted to build up a bed of coals quickly. So we weren't putting logs and stuff like that on there. So after about a half an hour, it had burned down sufficiently that we put this grill top on top of it, and we laid out the meat there. And about this time, we started hearing from the north. By the way, this road leads basically from the southwest, from the southeast to the northwest, ending up as a city street in Hopwood, which is 2 miles outside of Uniontown, the base of the Chestnut Ridge. So there we are. We start hearing this sound coming from the north, and it was pretty loud, and it was very odd. The best I can do for an imitation is it was a whistling sound, very loud, and it rose up in pitch and then dropped in pitch. It sounded kind of like this. This is a poor imitation, but it'll give you an idea of what it was like. Like that. And it would do it like 3 times, and then we wouldn't hear it anymore for a while. Like, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Then we'd hear it again from a different location. So this went on for an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And every time it was calling from a different location, like as if it was circling us, yet we never heard it moving through the woods. It stayed out like, more than 100 yards away from us. And this is the green season. This is September 9th, so it's technically still summer. Well, it had been it had been a beautiful, clear day all day, and that's why we decided to go up there to eat our dinner. We didn't even plan to stay up there after dark. Well, this has really got our attention now, because all three of us had spent a lot of time in the woods, and we never heard anything like this at all. And after a while, it started to get dark. Now, while we were up there, it started clouding up. So by the time it got dark, there was no moon, no stars. So when it gets dark up there like that, it's pitch black. So about that time, keep in mind this is 1986, there was no internet to go and listen to, recordings of Bigfoot calls, stuff like that. We started hearing it whooping, like the familiar whoop that everybody knows these days. It would let out 3 whoops and a woo, kind of like whoop, 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 woo! And it would do that like 3 times, and then it would stop. And the same modus operandi. It would do that, then it would move, and we'd hear it, on every side of us at one time or another, like it was circling us, but there was never a call and a response. So at the time we thought it was one individual. I still think it was one individual all these decades later. So now we're really perplexed. It's like, it was weird enough that whatever this thing is making this odd whistling call, and it seemed to be something that's very big, because it has, to generate that kind of volume. I know there's some very small creatures that can make loud sounds, but we were thinking, whatever this is, this thing is big to make this loud sound like that. Okay, so this went on again for about another, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, okay? And then it started heading down off the ridge. The road follows the ridge. And it started heading south, down off the ridge, and it was making single whoops now, about every 3 seconds. Again, we couldn't hear it moving down the heavily wooded hillside. We could only tell it was moving away by hearing the whoops getting farther and farther away. It got down almost off the ridge. It was way down there. And all that time we're talking, man, what could that thing be? It's a shame we never got a chance to see what it was. And I don't know what made me do this. I don't know. I just took in a deep breath and I let out one loud whoop, as loud as I could. And that thing immediately answered. It was whooping, the same whooping call, but the tenor, I guess, would changed. It was like as if, to me it seemed like when it was going down the hill whooping, individual whoops, it kind of had the tone of like, well, I'm here, where are you? I'm here. I'm like it was searching for another one of its own kind. But when I let that whoop out and it came back charging up that hillside, it was making the same sound, but the tenor of it had changed so much that it was like it was excited, like it had found what it was looking for. Meanwhile, it's coming up that hill whooping like crazy. Again, we still couldn't hear it moving, but it's coming like a car coming at you down the road. I mean, that fast. This thing had to be going like 45, 50 miles an hour, I would say. I mean, scary fast. And it's coming up that steep, heavily wooded hillside. It's not tripping over anything. It's not running into any trees. And it's coming fast. By now, we had let the fire go out. It was just coals, some coals on the ground. It wasn't illuminating anything, but this thing came right back to where we were. It stopped about, I would say, 100 feet away, and it let out the whistle again. We were terrified. We were crouched down in front of the car, so the car was between us and it. At this point, I would say I was like 49% terrified and 51% curious. So, it was my car. So we're not leaving until I'm ready. So it let out this whistle, and it was quiet for, it seemed like a long time, but it was probably no more than 30 seconds at most. and it let out this string of gibberish, which it really was like language. It wasn't the samurai chatter. There was none of this, none of that. There was no animal sounds in it. There was no groans, no grunts, no whistles, no barks, no pops. It was vowels and consonants. It sounded like it was furious. I mean, if I had been able to record that, we would be able to sit down and listen to the tape and write out the phonemes in vowels and consonants. That's how much it sounded like a language. That really freaked us out. Well, it was quiet then for about an hour, maybe a little more, but during that time, it did several things. First thing it did was it threw a rock at us. Second thing it did was it's the first time I ever heard wood knocks. We heard 5 rapid wood knocks, and this wasn't like in the space of just a couple minutes. These things were spaced out.
Can I interject real quick?
Sure.
How many people are in your group?
There was 3.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Me, Joe, and Steve.
Okay.
And
sorry, keep going.
Yeah, sure. So we're thinking, well, this wood on wood sound. We're thinking, well, whatever it is has to be strong enough to produce that kind of force. And it has to have something like a hand to be able to pick up a club and whack it on a tree. This is what we're thinking at the time, because, it sounded like somebody taking a wooden baseball bat and hitting a tree. And real fast. I mean, whack, 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 whack. 5 whacks real fast. It did another thing, which I don't know how it produced this sound, but it was like a muffled, loud kind of a whump. Almost like as if you had a couple of tons of soft material like mulch in a pile, and you dropped some heavy, like a tombstone on it. Imagine the sound that would make when it hit, just like a dull whump. So I don't know how it produced that sound. People over the years have said, do you think it jumped out of a tree? Well, I guess if it jumped out of a tree, and it might sound like that, but I really don't know. So after a good while, it started its 3 whoops and a woo, and going back to circling us, and every 10 minutes or 15 minutes it would let out those 3 whoops followed by a woo. Well, my friend Steve, this is so crazy. Before me and Joe could talk him out of it, he said, you know what, I'm going to find out what this thing is. And he took off in the woods before we could do anything to stop him. He's going through the woods towards this thing. The meantime, me and Joe are thinking, what if they find his dismembered body? How are we going to explain this to the police? I mean, really, honestly,
You're
that's
the
what
last
we're
people
thinking.
to see him.
That's what we were really thinking, So we're waiting there, and we can hear it whooping and getting farther and farther away. It would whoop, and then we wouldn't hear it. It would move farther away, and it would whoop again. Well, after about 15 minutes, Steve came back. He said, this thing was just playing with me, whatever it was. He said, I would work my way through the pitch black forest there and get up to where I felt like I was going to get up close to it, and then it would move. I could hear it moving when I got close to it, moving through the brush. And then it would whoop again, and I'd work my way through and get up to close to where it was, and it would move again. So I figured I'm never going to get close enough to see it, so he just decided to come back. So we hung around for a while, and it got to be around midnight. All 3 of us had to go to work the next day. So at that point, we decided to leave. It was actually still whooping as we were driving out. Now, we went up there the next day after work and looked around the area. We couldn't find any evidence at all that this had ever happened.